Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Natural Super Kids podcast. I am joined by Melissa Kirkwood from the Natural Super Kids team again today, and we are focusing on a topic that I think is going to be really popular. We definitely get lots of questions about this topic, and it is starting solids. So welcome, Mel.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
No worries. It's great to have you here. So for those of you who missed the last couple of episodes, Mel's been talking and sharing her wisdom on the Natural Super Kids podcast for the last couple of weeks. Last week, we focused on colic in babies, and the week before was a casual chat and just introducing Mel. So I would highly recommend you go and listen to those two episodes if you haven't already. And Mel has a special interest in infant nutrition. So we're covering another topic, as I said today, on infant nutrition, and talking all about starting solids. So for those people who might not know of you, Mel, do you want to just give us a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. So I am a qualified clinical nutritionist, and also a postpartum doula. And I have 10 years of experience working with families as a nanny. So I have introduced solids to many infants in the past. So I've got, experience with purees and spoon-fed versus baby-led weaning and things like that. So that's pretty much the gist of it.
Yeah. So you've got that great combination of that, real life experience with multiple children, coupled with that nutrition knowledge and wisdom now. So this is going to be a really great chat. So let's start by, I think it will be a good place to start talking about, how do we know when our babies are ready to start solids? I think there's so much conflicting information out there as to when we should start to feed baby solids. So can you give us some tips and some clarity on that?
Yeah, sure. So the current recommendation is that infants should be exclusively breastfed or formula fed until 6 months of age. This is because breast milk and formula milk contain a full nutrient profile full of the essential nutrients that are required for an infant up until 6 months of age. So often we hear of GPs or pediatricians suggesting that parents should offer solids as young as 4 months, often to kind of help with things like colic and sleep issues. But in my personal opinion, I just think that is just too young in terms of their development. And, starting solids too early can cause digestive discomfort and actually increase those, sleep issues and things like that, not to mention eczema, constipation, and the likes. So the easiest way to determine if your baby is ready for solids is to look for the signs of readiness. So these are firstly being able to sit up unassisted with good head and neck control. So this means without being propped up with pillows or in a high chair or in a bumbo. So they should be able to sit up on the ground by themselves, upright without wobbling. And this is also, you can indicate this when they are doing tummy time, that their head and neck is also kept upright and they're not kind of like falling forward with their face towards the floor. The second one would be showing an interest in food and engaging with eating. So watching you eat, opening their mouths when you're eating, but also a big one is also knowing to turn away when they've had enough. And I think with that one, people, babies often show that they're interested in food quite early, so at like 4 months. So people get a bit confused where they're like, well, my baby wants food. I can tell that they're hungry. But I think it's more so that they just want to be involved in what you're doing. So if you have a younger baby, say around 4 months, that is kind of showing interest and reaching for food, but still doesn't have that head control, I would suggest not starting solids, but welcoming them to the table and the family dinner situation, and just like giving them props to kind of play with while you eat. So like a spoon and things like that. The third one would be the ability to use their little pincer fingers and grab food, or to be able to hold a spoon to their mouth with assistance with mum and dad. So just being able to use their hands to pick up food and grab things. And then the last one is the loss of their extrusion reflex, so the tongue tie reflex, which gives them the opportunity to kind of gag out the food. So over time, this reflex reduces. And an easy way to tell whether the reflex is still present is if the baby's tongue thrusts forward and rejects the spoon. So this just is, a way for them to be able to have the food in their mouth and swallow it appropriately.
Yes, I love all of those points, because we can get so caught up in the exact age of when they're ready for solids, but all babies develop so differently. So
yes,
some might 100%. Be ready some might be ready a little bit earlier, and some, it might be a little bit later as well. So I think that that's really helpful to know those signs of readiness. Okay, so once we have confirmed that there are those signs of readiness in our babies and we're ready to start feeding them, the big question is, do we do baby-led weaning or do we do spoon feeding? Can you talk to this for us?
Yeah, sure. So I personally think, every family situation is different and every lifestyle is different. So I believe in doing whatever is suitable for you and your family's needs and lifestyle. The aim is to be introducing a diverse range of nutrient-dense foods in whatever shape and form that comes in. I think if I could suggest anything, it would be to keep packaged baby food from the supermarket as a sometimes food. So this is more so the towards puree spoon-fed babies. And this is just because we don't know how long that sachet of puree has been sitting on the shelf, where it's come from, the journey it took to get to the supermarket. So the convenience of those foods is fantastic, but you just don't know how long it's been sitting on the shelf for. So keeping those as kind of like a sometimes food when you're rushed, that would be my biggest point here. And then when it comes to spoon feeding, so it is just that, it's feeding your baby pureed food via a spoon. And then baby-led weaning involves introducing your baby to finger food and allowing them to feed themselves. So you would just cut it up in appropriate sized foods according to their age, and then allowing them to use their pincer grips and feeding themselves with supervision from you. I'm probably personally more inclined to lean. I've done both with families that I've nannied for, but I'm probably personally more inclined to lean towards baby-led weaning, just because I think it's a great way to allow your baby to explore different foods, different textures, sensations, smells and flavors and things like that. With puree and spoon-fed, obviously all the foods are mushed together and they have one texture. So, yeah, as you kind of move towards 9 months, they suggest that your baby should definitely be introduced to some form of finger food if they haven't already.
Yeah. Okay. That's really great to know. And yeah, thanks for clarifying what baby-led weaning is. I kind of got ahead of myself and just assumed that everyone knew. And I think a lot of our audience will know, but I think, yeah, it's important to go back to those basics. And for me personally, I mean, it was a long time ago that I was introducing solids to my now teenagers. But I really like to do a combination of both. You know, the baby-led weaning was really, I was really drawn to that. But, sometimes it's really messy and, they're not getting a lot actually in their mouths, which is fine when you're first starting. So I liked to, I got a lot of joy out of, making up the purees and putting as much nutrition as I could in there. But I loved the baby-led weaning can be really convenient at times because they're doing it themselves, and they're learning so many skills by feeding themselves as well.
Yeah, and often, some parents might just not feel confident in giving their babies whole food in the baby-led weaning style. So just do whatever you feel comfortable with. But I think you made a good point is like with the purees, just packing as many nutrients as possible into that pureed food. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. And when we're first feeding babies, they're generally not very, most of the time, they're not very fussy. You can get things in that you will never get into a toddler later on.
Yeah. And I think, we need to point out that in that first kind of 12 months of life, breast milk and formula is the most important thing. So food it comes second because they're getting all the nutrients they need through the breast milk and the formula anyway. So don't stress too much. And you can take the introduction of solids quite slowly and just listen to your intuition and what your baby's cues are anyway. As long as they are still having that formula and or breast milk, that's the most important thing for the first 12 months.
Yes, such a good point. Like we don't need to get a whole heap of food into their bodies in that first 12 months. That nutrition still comes from the breast milk or formula. So that's a really good point. Okay, so let's talk, so there's a bit of worry, I think, from lots of parents about allergies, particularly if there's been previous children in the family that have had allergies or there's allergies in the family. So what are the big allergies that we need to sort of be aware of when we are introducing solids into our babies, and when do we introduce them? Because this is a real controversial topic as well.
Yeah, sure. So there are 9 top allergens. They are chicken eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, sesame, fish, shellfish, soy, wheat, and dairy/cow's milk. So the guidelines suggest that you should introduce those 9 allergenic foods between the ages of 6 to 11 months. So a lot of people kind of think to avoid these foods until your child gets older. But the more you expose them to smaller amounts of food, of these allergens, the less likely they are to have an allergy to the allergen, to the allergenic food. Once your child is comfortable with eating low-risk allergy foods, so safe foods such as like sweet potato, they've got all the signs of readiness, they're happily eating a safe food like sweet potato, then you would slowly start working through the list. So you would aim to introduce 1 allergenic food at a time, working your way through the list. Because for some sensitivities, it can actually take up to 3 days to notice any symptoms. So therefore, each allergenic food should be given 1 at a time, and there should be a break in between. So you give it 1 at a time every 4 to 5 days, and the symptoms should be monitored. And then each allergenic food should have at least 3 exposures, so 3 attempts of feeding them the food before ruling it out as a safe food. So it can take a while. That's why they say from 6 to 11 months. And starting with egg. So you would start with like the egg yolk and then making your way through the list down to wheat and dairy, because they tend to be the most common out of them. And then, yeah. So that's how you would do it. And then how to introduce the allergenic foods would be, so for spoon feeding babies, if you were just doing exclusively purees, you would mix a small amount of the allergenic food into a safe food. So, for instance, a quarter of a teaspoon of peanut butter into apple puree, give it to them, and then you would wait 4 to 5 days and then trial that again. And you would do that 3 times. And then once there are no symptoms, then you know that peanut butter is a safe food and you can continue to give peanuts to your child going forward. And then for baby-led weaning, you would do the same, so a small amount, but you would do it as a finger food. So, for instance, like making, if you personally, as mum or dad, made an egg yolk or egg white omelette, and then you would just give your child a tiny piece of that and monitor for symptoms. And then if there's no signs of reaction, you would just increase over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like just having a list of these foods on your fridge could be really helpful, and just putting a little line every time that you have exposed your child to that, just so you can kind of keep track. So it doesn't need to be really difficult to keep track of this. It can just be done sort of simply. But I think that's really helpful, and will help to ease parents' concerns, because the recommendations on this has changed. Like I said, it was a while ago that I was introducing solids to my babies, but back then it was, that particularly from a naturopathic standpoint, that you waited a bit longer to introduce those allergenic foods, and the advice, and because of the research, has changed. So I think it's really helpful for people to know that.
Yeah. I think there was a study, I don't know it 100%, about peanut allergies, and introducing peanuts to an infant over time drastically reduces the chance of anaphylaxis to peanuts. I can find the study and put it in the show notes, but because I don't know all the ins and outs of it. But yeah, the research has changed on introducing.
Yes, I think that's the same study that I've come across as well. Yeah, so it's interesting, and that's the thing, the research is always changing, particularly when it comes to things like allergies and the gut microbiome. We do need to change our advice based on what the research is telling us. So that is helpful to know. Okay, and now let's talk about the nutrition and the top nutrients that mums and dads need to consider when starting solids, and what are some of those first food recommendations that you would recommend?
Yeah, sure. So the top nutrients for infants would be iron, zinc, your omega-3 and DHA fatty acids, vitamin D3, choline, and calcium. And then kind of the gut healing, gut health ones, so your probiotics and your fermented foods as well. And in terms of first foods, it can be a bit controversial, because most doctors will still recommend rice cereal as a first food to try for your baby. And this is because it is fortified with iron and meets your baby's iron requirements. So at around 6 months of age, your baby will stop receiving iron from breast milk, and they will need to have it from food. So most doctors just say, okay, so now is the time to start feeding your baby rice cereal. But the iron that is in the rice cereal is coming from a fortified source of iron, and it's often poorly absorbed by infants, which kind of makes it pointless. So I personally think that rice cereal is just a little too harsh for a brand new baby that's new to digesting food, and would often opt for other options, so whole food sources, um, of food that are full of iron, plus, the healthy fats and nutrients that aren't in rice cereals, such as zinc, vitamin D, your DHA. So although rice cereal has the iron, it's really lacking in a lot of other things.
Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, that's like it's fortified because it really rice cereal as a food, standalone food, doesn't contain much nutrition at all. So they fortify it with iron, and as you said, it's not very well absorbed. So I agree. I do not recommend rice cereal as a first food. There's so many better options, aren't there?
Yeah, yeah. So for those, I guess, iron-rich first foods, you would be looking at one. It's a bit of a tricky one because once you need to kind of go through the allergens, but so it would be beef liver is a safe one, which I know can be. Some people are like, oh gosh, that's disgusting, but it is so nutrient dense. And it's quite easy. So for purees, you can get, say pureed sweet potato, and then you can just grate frozen beef liver into that, or you can get the capsules and just pour the capsules into the puree as well. So you can't taste it. Your baby won't know that there's any beef liver in there, but it is just packed with iron and choline and just so many beautiful nutrients. So that's another one. Grass-fed beef and lamb. Spirulina is really good. So you can, again, add that to any kind of puree. What else? We've got like broccoli, steamed spinach, organic chicken, and then like once the fish has been sorted for allergens, you could do wild caught salmon and things like that. But yeah, when you kind of are starting creating and offering food to your baby, you really want to ensure that they are as nutrient dense and as rich as possible in iron, zinc, and omega-3s. So thinking of food, you want to begin with, you want to stick to easy digestible foods, such as well-cooked vegetables, very ripe fruits, cooking meats in bone broth and making them slow-cooked and easy to kind of digest. And then just always remembering that for this age group, as I said, breast milk and formula is still the most important meal and should take a priority. And food shouldn't replace the milk. So they're getting as many nutrients as they can from the breast milk or the formula. And the food should just be offered in between their milk time. So when starting foods, I often say mid-morning is best after their first nap. Because they wake up and they're alert and then they're ready to, to deal with the food. You don't want to feed a baby that's tired and grumpy.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's not going to go well, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's really great. And I just wanted to add that, when we're focusing on whole foods, I think you might have even mentioned this briefly, but just wanted to really sort of, put this point across that when we're using whole foods rather than processed baby foods, we're getting a whole range of nutrients in them. And as you said, iron, zinc, and omega-3s are some of the most important nutrients we need to get in. And a lot of these foods that you have mentioned has more than one of those nutrients in there. So focusing on like you said, the fruits and the vegetables and the good quality meats, particularly those slow cooked meats. I mean, really just including a range of those type of foods can make up a really good diet for an infant.
Yeah. And like even for baby-led weaning, if you don't feel confident in giving your baby meat, what you can do is get like a a rib bone that's been, slow cooked, and cut off the meat, but have a little bit left on there, and just allow your baby to gnaw on that. So they're not going to choke on a huge rib from meat, but they're still going to get that texture in their mouth and get used to the sensation of the food while still kind of getting a little bit of the nutrients from the meat and from the bone, gnawing on the bone. Yeah, and another one people often suggest is with mangoes, starting babies with just the mango seed. So cutting off, a fair bit of the flesh, but allowing a little bit on there and allowing them to kind of hold it and suck it. Especially with baby-led weaning, the hardest thing is like slippery food and them trying to hold on to it with their little pincers. So trying to kind of make things easier for them. So, they can't probably pick up a piece of mango, but they can kind of gnaw on the seed because that's big enough. Another really great first food is ripe avocado. But the same thing, it's really hard for them to pick up. So you can always roll it in hemp seeds or ground flax seeds, or once you've tested for allergens, you could roll it in almond meal or sesame seeds or something like that. So then it just gives them a bit, it's a bit easier for them to pick up and grab.
Definitely. And also getting them used to, texture, different textures within the food as well, because that can be a big issue for kids getting used to textures and can last for years. So helping them develop that or giving them exposure to different textures is good as well.
Yeah, and I guess that's the whole goal of first foods, is you really want to expose them to as many flavors and textures and things like that, so then they're used to it later in life. So another really good food to try is fermented foods. And it's good to start earlier because fermented foods can be quite tangy. But we know how many benefits fermented foods have for the gut health and the gut microbiome. So starting and giving your baby food and diversifying it earlier in life will make your life easier later in life. And I'm not saying that, because some toddlers do regress and you give them something and then all of a sudden they hate it and they're never going to eat it again. But trying to diversify and get them used to as many foods as possible, as young as possible, will hopefully, fingers crossed, make your life a bit easier and try and they won't be so fussy.
Reduce
later
that fussy
down
eating.
the track.
I totally agree. And what they eat as babies isn't going to be guaranteed they'll keep eating that throughout, all of their years. But as you're saying, the more, exposure that you can give them to different tastes and textures, don't be worried about adding, little bits of spices, not chili spices, but different spices into baby's food as well. I think that can be really helpful for getting them exposed and used to different tastes and textures. But also we know that diversity within the diet is really important for diversity within the gut microbiome. So it's a win-win, right?
Yeah, and I think just if you just mimicking kind of how you eat. If you eat a very healthy diet that's flavorful and packed with nutrients, that's what you're going to give your baby anyway. So you just want them to kind of be included in the family meals. You don't want it to be this huge ordeal where they have to eat something different. So I think that is more aligned with the baby-led weaning, where you would make a meal and just kind of offer them a little bit and it grows from there. But sitting around and eating as a family is really important as well when you're starting solids. So that really encourages babies and toddlers to kind of have healthy habits when it comes to eating as well.
Yeah, and I have always been very much taken that approach of getting baby to eat kind of a version of what everyone else is eating as soon as possible, I think, because then naturally you are giving them sort of more diversity. You're not just giving them that same pureed baby food that you made a big batch of last week that's going to last you for a month, every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, that is really helpful. And I hope that, if you're a parent listening to this and, thinking about, or maybe you've already started on the journey of introducing solids, I hope you got some great tips from Mel today. And Mel does specialize in this area of infant nutrition and infant health. So head on over to our website at Natural Super Kids and check out her services. She is offering online consultations to support parents with all things infant health and so much more as well. This is just one of her specialty areas. So thanks so much for joining me, Mel, and sharing your wisdom.
Thanks so much, Jess.
See ya. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.